They say success can change a person, but what they never tell you is that it can also erase the sound of home. This is the story of a man who climbed so high he forgot the hands that built his ladder, and of a mother whose love refused to disappear, even when he did. It is a story about pride, about forgiveness, and about the kind of hunger that does not live in the stomach, but in the heart. His name was Orion Hayes. And before he learned what it meant to win, he had to learn what it meant to come back. Before the story begins, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and what time this story has found you. Morning? Afternoon? Late at night? I read every comment, every single one, and I am grateful you are here. Now, let us begin. Orion Hayes grew up learning that hunger was not all meat in the stomach. It had footsteps in the hallway, and a voice that asked if the light could stay off a little longer. His mother, Delphina, measured life in quiet sacrifices. How long the gas could last if she boiled water instead of food. How far a pair of shoes could go if she patched the soles herself. How much love a small apartment could hold without bursting from hope. She never complained. She simply smiled, and Orion asked why their lights flickered and said, "The world blinks too sometimes, my son. It is only resting." His father, Marcus, built cabinets for people whose kitchens gleamed like magazines. His own smelled of varnish and sawdust, but the wood bent for him because his hands were honest. He wore a plain leather bracelet with a thin strip of steel, a promise he made to himself that he would always work with his hands, never his fists. A man should leave the world straighter than he found it, Marcus would say, smoothing the corners of a drawer. Orion repeated those words like scripture, too young to understand that the world sometimes breaks the straightest men first. When Marcus died, the shop debts did not die with him. They stayed. They tightened. They found Delphina instead. Delphina took extra shifts at the hotel, working rooms full of strangers who never saw her face, only the crispness of their sheets. Every night she came home exhausted, but smiling. For Orion's sake, she made him believe the lights flickered because the stars were jealous. At school, Orion kept quiet. He was the boy who stayed behind after class to fix the projector, the boy whose notebooks were smudged with graphite and ideas. That is where Mr. Thatcher found him, a retired engineer with too much time and not enough patience for wasted potential. He noticed the boy's hands, steady and certain, the way Marcus's must have been. Mr. Thatcher became his mentor, his after-school project, his second chance. Together, they built things that worked. When Orion turned 16 years old, Mr. Thatcher placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Brains like yours should not stay hidden under leaky roofs." He helped him apply for a scholarship, the National STEAM Scholars Grant. The day the acceptance letter arrived, Delphina cried over it as if grief itself had finally bloomed into something new. Mr. Thatcher ironed Orion's first scholarship tie. And he told him quietly, "Do not apologize for ambition. Apologize for arrogance." Orion nodded, not knowing yet how thin that line can be. University brochures showed lawns that had never learned the language of dust. Orion studied the pictures until they blurred, unable to imagine himself in a world where hunger did not echo down the hallway, but he went anyway. Not because he believed he belonged there, but because Delphina believed enough for both of them. He chose industrial engineering with the minor in economics, a balance between logic and survival. Mr. Thatcher called it a degree for boys who fix things that should not have been broken in the first place. And Orion fixed everything he could: machines, projects, group assignments, anything that stayed still long enough to need improving. The first semester, he called home every night to tell Delphina about the dorm food, and the professors who talked too fast, and the classmates who smelled like freedom. By the second semester, the calls became weekly, then monthly. Success has a strange way of teaching distance. The more it gives, the less you feel you owe the people who helped you reach it. In his final year, recruiters circled the campus like hawks. Orion landed an internship at Highmark Consulting, a firm whose name carried weight and salaries that whispered promises. the internship became a full-time position before graduation. Highmark's lobby gleamed with glass and self-importance. Inside those walls, ambition was not just encouraged, it was currency. Orion acted quickly. He learned how to speak in numbers that sounded like authority, how to sit forward in meetings without looking eager, how to smile without giving too much away. His rise was fast, but so was his transformation. The boy who once counted light bulbs to make sure they could afford the bill now forgot to return his mother's calls. Her voice notes piled up on his phone, soft reminders wrapped in laughter and love, marked later, until later became never. That is when Ethan Ward appeared, Highmark's golden boy. Charming, confident, born into the kind of privilege that does not apologize for its existence. Ethan moved through the office as if every desk belonged to him. His laughter cut through the tension of deadlines, and he noticed Orion's potential the way a predator notices movement in tall grass. "Brother," Ethan said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You have the kind of brain that makes bosses nervous." At first, Orion took it as a compliment. Later, he realized it was a warning. They worked late nights together, Ethan with his whiskey and easy charm, Orion with his precision and spreadsheets. They made a good team, until the spotlight tilted toward Orion. When clients praised him, Ethan smiled wider. When bonuses came, Ethan celebrated louder. Still, Orion climbed. Promotions stacked up like steps in a staircase he never meant to build. His name appeared in emails that mattered. His paychecks grew, and with them, his pride. Delphina tried not to take the silence personally. She told the ladies at church, "My boy's just busy." Important people are always busy. But at night, when the world quieted, she replayed his old voice notes just to hear his laugh again. It was during that strange, glittering season of success, when Orion's life sparkled but somehow felt hollow, that he met Amethyst. He almost did not attend the charity gala. He would spend the week buried in a difficult client project and planned to spend Friday night with silence and noise-canceling headphones. But Ethan insisted. Networking builds empires, brother. One night, change everything. He was half right. Amethyst stood near the donation table, not near the cameras, not near the people trying to be seen. She was not dressed to impress. She was dressed like herself, calm, quiet, a presence that did not ask for attention, but commanded it. Orion approached her, offering the same line he would practiced 100 times. "Hi, my name is Orion Hayes. I work in strategic growth and client portfolio management." She smiled politely. "That sounds complicated." "It can be," he said, forcing a confident smirk. "It is about helping businesses expand their impact." Her head tilted gently. "No, what do you actually do to help?" He froze. No one had ever asked him that. Not like that. He opened his mouth to answer, but the words refused to come. She waited. Then she gave a kind nod and said softly, "Nice meeting you," and she walked away. That night, her question stayed with him like a melody he could not stop replaying. For days, he caught himself hearing it again and again. What do you actually do to help? He did not have an answer, and he hated that. By the next week, he was looking for her name. He found it in the event program. Amethyst Cole, community social worker. She worked at a youth center a few blocks from Highmark. That Saturday, Orion walked in pretending to volunteer for corporate outreach. In truth, he just wanted to see her again. When their eyes met, she raised a single eyebrow, amused. "Corporate outreach, huh?" He chuckled, a little too quickly, trying to be useful for once. "Well," she said, pointing at a stack of boxes, "usefulness starts with heavy lifting." They spent the morning sorting donated supplies. Amethyst spoke to the children the way sunlight speaks to water. Warm, soft, patient. Orion listened more than he talked. And for once, silence did not feel like weakness. It felt like clarity. They started getting coffee afterward. Small, accidental moments that slowly became intentional. When Orion slipped and called her Ames one day, she laughed and said it suited her better than half her shoes. She told him she had lost her mother young, that grief was a language she learned before adulthood. He told her he had lost his father too, but said little else. She did not push. She simply said, "Then you know how it feels to miss someone in every version of yourself." They were opposites, her world built on empathy, his built on efficiency, yet somehow, they fit. One evening, Amethyst asked, "Do you ever visit your mom?" "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes," he hesitated. "She's proud of me, but she does not really get my world." Amethyst smiled faintly. "Maybe it is your world that does not get hers." The question stayed with him, quiet but sharp. Athena always believed that love did not need proof, only presence. Even when Orion forgot to call, she told herself silence was just another kind of noise, the sound of a busy life. She replayed his old voice notes at night, the ones where he promised, "When I make it, you will never work again, Mama." She smiled through the ache. Some promises are like prayers. You repeat them not because you expect an answer, but because you want to keep believing. One Tuesday morning, she decided to visit him. Not because she wanted anything, only to see him, to touch the face she had sacrificed everything for. She woke before dawn, ironed her best blouse, and slipped Marcus's bracelet into a small velvet pouch. It was the last thing he would worn before the accident. She kept it wrapped in a handkerchief all these years. The metal warmed in her hands as if it still remembered its owner. She told herself she would give it to Orion that day, that maybe wearing it would steady him, the way it once steadied Marcus. When she reached Highmark Consulting, the building looked like it was built to intimidate dreams. All glass, all silence. The receptionist smiled politely. "Do you have an appointment?" No," Delphina replied softly. "I am looking for Orion Hayes. I am his mother." Upstairs, Orion was in a meeting, presenting quarterly projections to 2 senior partners. Ethan sat across from him, watching him closely. The receptionist's voice came through the speaker. "There's a woman here who says she is your mother." Orion froze. The partners looked at him. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Amused, sharp, dangerous. It was a small moment, a heartbeat, but pride and panic collided in that single breath. And Orion said words that would haunt him. "I do not know who that is. If you are still listening right now, type the word mother in the comments. Let me know you are here feeling this moment with me, because this is the moment that changes everything." Back to the story. He hung up before the echo could reach him. Downstairs, Delphina waited, with a patience only mothers understand. The receptionist looked at her, confusion softening into pity. I am sorry, ma'am." "He says he does not know you." Delphina's fingers tightened round the velvet pouch. The room tilted slightly, not from dizziness, from disbelief. She nodded once, gently. "Maybe I have the wrong floor." She walked out with her dignity wrapped around her like a thin shawl. Outside, the sky was bright, unkindly so. She found a bench at the bus station and sat down, placing the pouch gently on her lap. For a long time, she stared at it and whispered to herself. Maybe he did not hear her right. Maybe it was a mistake. But when she finally stood to catch her bus, her knees gave out. The pouch rolled under the bench. Delphina slid sideways, her legs folding beneath her as the world kilted into blur. "Tell me where you are watching from, and what time of day this story found you. I read every single comment, every single heart behind them, and I want to know who is holding their breath with me right now." Back to the story. A stranger shouted for help. Others rushed to her side. One asked, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Another yelled, "Call the ambulance." By the time the ambulance arrived, Delphina's breath came shallow and thin, her hands trembling like loose paper. At the hospital, the nurses found the velvet pouch hanging loosely from her bag. Someone from the bus stop had placed it there. They labeled it with her name and set it gently on the intake counter, not realizing it held more history than medicine ever could. Hours later, Orion's phone rang. He almost ignored it, thought it was just another work call, but something made him answer. "Is this Mr. Hayes?" a nurse asked. "Yes." he replied. This is West Side General Hospital. Your mother, Mrs. Delphina Hayes, is admitted. She collapsed earlier today. Everything around Orion went quiet. He did not remember leaving the building. He did not remember the drive, only the way the nurse looked at him when he arrived, as if she already knew the shape of his guilt. Delphina lay in bed, an IV hooked gently to her arm. Her eyes fluttered open. Orion, she whispered. I am here, Mom. She gave a small, tired smile. You came. He swallowed hard. Of course I did. She nodded, weak but calm. I only wanted to see your face. I did not mean to trouble anyone. Do not say that, he murmured. You are not trouble. But she turned her eyes to the ceiling, where the light flickered. Once, twice. The nurse approached, holding the velvet pouch. This was with her when she was brought in. Orion took it. Inside lay Marcus's bracelet. He closed his fingers around it, feeling the weight of the man he barely remembered and the mother he barely called. Orion stayed at the hospital until visiting hours ended. Delphina slept most of the evening, her breathing shallow but steady. When he finally stood to leave, he lingered in the doorway, guilt pressing into him like a second heartbeat. Outside, the air felt heavier. His reflection in the car window looked like a stranger, an expensive suit, a perfect tie, empty eyes. For the first time, he wondered what success had cost him. That same night, Ethan sat in a bar nearby, surrounded by junior analysts, laughing too loudly. When someone mentioned Orion's name, Ethan smirked over his glass. Good guy, he said lightly. Bit too emotional, though. Does not always understand what it takes to stay on top. He hid the smirk behind his drink, but it was there. Orion barely slept. The bracelet lay on the table beside his phone, catching the dull glow of the city lights. He turned it over again and again, tracing the worn edges with his thumb. His father's initials, M.H., were faint from years of labor. He remembered Delphina's soft voice. I only wanted to see your face. That one sentence played in his mind until guilt felt like noise. The next morning, he walked into Highmark's gleaming lobby as if nothing had happened. The world does not pause for remorse. It moves around it, steps over it. Ethan was waiting near the elevators. Brother, he slapped Orion's back. You missed a hell of a meeting yesterday. The partners were singing your praises. Orion forced a tight smile. Good to hear. Everything okay? Ethan asked. His tone sugared, but not sweet. Yeah, family stuff. Ah? Ethan leaned on the rail. Family. Complicated business. The elevator dinged, cutting the conversation short. Orion stepped out first, grateful to escape, but unaware that Ethan's eyes followed him with interest and calculation. The rest of the day, Orion's focus scattered like loose paper. When his phone buzzed, he half expected it to be the hospital, but it was Amethyst. How is your mom? She texted. He had told her everything the night before. Stable, he replied. I will visit after work. Do that, she wrote back. And tell her she raised someone who knows how to show up. He stared at the message for a long moment. Comfort felt strange now, heavy, undeserved. By evening, he returned to the hospital. Delphina was stronger, propped up against her pillows, quietly eating soup. When she saw him, she smiled. A small, uncertain smile, the kind people wear when they are testing if forgiveness is real. You came again, she said softly. I should have come sooner. Her eyes glistened, but she said only, then we are even. Later, when he left, he called Amethyst. You sound tired, she said. I am. How is she doing? She will be okay. But something happened. He hesitated. She came to my office before she collapsed. Amethyst fell silent. You saw her there? She asked. He gripped the steering wheel. Not exactly. What does not exactly mean, Orion? It means, I panicked. I said something I should not have. What did you say? He exhaled, every breath straight. I told the receptionist. I told her I did not know who she was. The silence that followed was sharper than shouting. Finally, Amethyst whispered, You did not? I did, he said. It was a mistake. I did not mean. Orion Jeremiah Hayes. She rarely used his full name. You denied your mother. You broke something you cannot buy back. I know, he whispered. Do you? She asked softly. Because you talk like it was an error in a spreadsheet, not a wound you left in a person. He said nothing. And for 2 days they did not speak. At Highmark, rumors began to move like smoke. Someone in compliance noticed irregularities in Orion's project budgets. Ethan played the perfect friend. Probably a clerical thing, he told colleagues. Orion's too smart to mess up like that. But behind closed doors, Ethan was feeding numbers and whispers to the partners. Little things, half-truths, just enough to make Orion look guilty of things he never touched. When Orion was called into a meeting with HR and compliance, he assumed it was about a new client. Instead, they handed him a stack of printed reports. "E-reimbursements," the officer said, "were approved under your account." "I did not sign these," Orion replied. "They carry your digital signature. Then someone forged it." "That is a serious accusation," the officer said carefully. "Do you have proof?" Orion looked up. Faces he once trusted looked back at him like strangers. He realized, in that room he was alone. That evening, Ethan stopped by his desk. "You good, brother?" he asked. Orion stared at him. "You knew about this?" "Word gets around," Ethan shrugged. "Do not worry. You will clear it up. I did not authorize those expenses." "Of course not." Ethan's voice was smooth. "Still, you know how things look when numbers do not line up." For the first time, Orion saw it clearly. The smile, the sympathy, the trap. The next morning, Orion's suspension email became official. Pending investigation into financial misconduct. The message was terse, formal, and signed by a partner he had once admired. Within hours, whispers spread through the industry. Amethyst found him sitting in his car outside the youth center, staring at nothing. "You are letting this destroy you," she said. "I did not do what they are accusing me of." "Then fight back." "I do not even know where to start." She handed him a folder. Inside were printed screenshots, text between Ethan and a junior auditor, messages bragging about covering tracks and keeping the kid quiet until the bonus clears. Orion's pulse spiked. "Where did you get this?" "From someone," she said, who finally realized she was dating a snake. That night, Orion gathered every piece of proof he could find. Expense records, project emails, timestamps, access logs. For the first time, he noticed patterns he had missed. Small approvals slipped under his login. Numbers altered at hours he was not even online. Entries he never touched. Ethan had forged the perfect illusion and used Orion's trust as his pen. The next morning, Orion placed everything in front of Highmark's board. The partners' faces were unreadable. Compliance officer's jaw was tight. When he finished, he said quietly, "Check the metadata. I am done defending myself to shadows." He walked out before they could answer. 2 days later, Ethan stopped showing up to work. By the end of the week, his access badge had been revoked, and whispers about a separate inquiry filled the hallways. Orion did not feel triumphant. He just felt emptied. He went to see Delphina. She was sitting on the porch folding laundry. Her movements were slower now. "You look tired," she said. "I could say the same," he replied. "Do not," she smiled faintly. "I am too old to believe pretty lies." They sat together for a long while. Finally, she asked, "Do you know what broke your father?" Orion shook his head. "Debt," she said, and silence. She spoke quietly, like someone unwrapping an old wound. "He borrowed money to keep the shop open, promised he would pay it back when business improved. But business never improved. The men he borrowed from did not send letters. They sent reminders with fists. One of them came to your school once. Mr. Thatcher stepped between them. After that, Marcus closed the shop and started taking cash-only jobs at night, so they could not find him. He did not leave us, Orion. He hid us." Words hit like revelation, and like a wound. All those years Orion had thought his father weak. Now he saw the quiet courage in choosing to bear the weight alone. Later that evening, Orion drove to Mr. Thatcher's small house on the edge of town. The old man opened the door before Orion could knock twice. I figured you would show up, he said. You've got the same storm in your eyes your father had when he came to see me. You knew about the debts? I knew enough, Mr. Thatcher said. I tried to help him restructure the payments, but pride is a wall even math cannot climb. He thought keeping it from you and Delphina was protection. Maybe it was for a while. He walked to a shelf and pulled out a wooden box. Inside was the old Hayes & Sons cabinary sign, cleaned but not restored. I saved this after the shop closed, he said. Thought maybe you would want it someday. Orion ran his fingers over the letters. They were rough, imperfect, like truth. He was not just building furniture, Orion murmured. He was trying to build safety, and you, Mr. Thatcher said, have been building distance. Time to switch blueprints, son. On the way home, Orion's phone buzzed. A message from Amethyst. Your mom was not answering her phone, so I stopped by to check on her. She looked dizzy and weak. I'm taking her to the clinic. Meet us there. He did not even finish reading before he started the car. Delphina lived 40 minutes away, in a quiet neighborhood where the buses still rattled louder than the radios. Amethyst's small apartment was only 10 minutes from there, close enough for concern to become instinct. When Delphina did not answer repeated calls that evening, Amethyst asked a neighbor for help, found the door unlocked, and discovered her pale and trembling on the couch. By the time Orion arrived at the clinic, Delphina was sitting upright but exhausted. The doctor explained that stress and exhaustion had weakened her heart. She is stable, he said, but she cannot keep living alone. Orion sat beside her bed and held her hand, the bracelet glinting faintly on his wrist. I am sorry, he whispered. If this moment touched something inside you, type the word mother's love in the comments. Sometimes it takes losing everything to remember who held us first. Let us continue with the story. You are sorry for what? Delphina asked gently. For all of it, he said quietly. For forgetting where I came from. Delphina smiled, weary, but soft. You did not forget, my son. You just got lost on the way home. In the doorway, Amethyst watched silently, her arms folded. Tears glistened in her eyes, but there was peace on her face. Later, as they walked to the parking lot, Orion said, I do not deserve father of you. Maybe not, Amethyst said gently, but you have us anyway. The only question now is what you do with that grace. That night, he could not sleep. He took Marcus's bracelet off and set it beside the old shop sign, 2 relics of a life built on endurance. Then he began to write a resignation letter, simple, final, a formal statement to HR and the board, laying out the proof of his innocence, a personal statement for a smaller, more honest firm, somewhere the work would matter more than the title. By morning he had chosen something different, to start again, smaller, but honest. Ethan Ward did not vanish quietly. His downfall came the same way his success had, with noise and charm. And far too many witnesses. Highmark's internal audit confirmed what Orion's evidence had already whispered: forged signatures, redirected reimbursements, false project accounts. The numbers told their story without mercy. Within a week, Ethan was called into a closed-door meeting that lasted 30 minutes. He left the building without his ID badge, without his grin, without his reputation. The news traveled quickly through the city's glass towers, not as gossip, but as warnings. The man who once called everyone brother suddenly had no one left to shake hands with. The industry's memory was long. No firm would risk hiring him again. When Orion heard, he did not celebrate. He just sat in his car outside Delphina's clinic, feeling the strange hollowness that comes when justice finally arrives, but does not taste like victory. Amethyst joined him there, carrying 2 cups of tea. So it is over, she said softly. Not really, he replied. It does not give me back the time I lost. No, she said, but it gives you the chance to use the time you have left. He smiled faintly. You always know what to say. She shrugged. I work with kids who think forgiveness is weakness. I have learned it is actually architecture, something you keep building, even when the foundation cracks. A few days later, his phone rang again. This time, the number on the screen belonged to Highmark. One of the senior partners spoke carefully. Orion, the voice said. The audit is complete. Your record is clear. We are deeply sorry for the misunderstanding. We would like you to return, perhaps in an even more senior capacity, once things settle. Orion listened in silence, watching people walk in and out of the clinic doors, his mother inside, Amethyst inside, his real life inside. Thank you, he said at last, his voice steady. Thank you for clearing my name. He looked down at Marcus's bracelet on his wrist. But I am choosing a different kind of success now. One that does not forget the smell of sawdust. There was a pause on the line. We understand this is a big decision, the partner began. It is, Orion replied gently. And I have made it. He ended the call. For the first time in a long time, he felt light. Not because someone important had approved of him, but because he had approved of himself. Inside, Delphina was recovering well. She had moved to a smaller apartment closer to Orion's new office, not because she wanted to be fussed over, but because she finally admitted she was tired of doing everything alone. Orion visited every morning before work, dropping off groceries, changing light bulbs, fixing whatever needed mending. They did not talk much about the past. They talked about small things, the weather, the neighbor's loud TV, what she was cooking for dinner. The silence between them no longer carried blame. It carried peace. His new firm offered him a position in community development, smaller projects, local businesses, honest budgets. He accepted without hesitation. His first initiative was a mentorship fund in Marcus's name, helping young apprentices afford tools and materials to start their own trades. Mr. Thatcher insisted on being the first donor. At the launch, a local newspaper sent a photographer. Orion stood beneath the newly restored sign, Hayes and Sons Cabinetry. It now hung above a community workshop. The wood gleamed softly under the lights. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "For those who hold the next generation on their shoulders." Well, when the reporter asked for a quote, Orion thought for a long moment. "We are standing with the grain now," he said finally. The reporter looked puzzled. In the crowd, Amethyst and Delphina smiled. They understood. After the event, they drove to the river, the same one where Orion and Amethyst had once taken a picture, back when he still believed success meant skyscrapers instead of second chances. The evening light draped the water in gold, and the wind smelled faintly of rain. Amethyst kicked off her shoes and stood at the edge, letting the water touch her toes. "You ever think," she asked lightly, "about what your life would look like if you had not messed up so badly all the time?" he admitted. "But then I realized I would not be here, not like this, not with you, not with her." She turned to him, smiling softly. "You are learning," she said. He stepped closer, hands in his pockets, the bracelet glinting on his wrist. "Amethyst," he began, voice trembling just a little. She raised an eyebrow. "You only use my full name when you are scared or serious. Which is it this time?" "Both," he confessed. "I keep thinking about how much I owe you, how much I owe her. And I keep thinking, maybe someday, when I am sure I deserve it." He stopped, then smiled. "Maybe I will ask you to make this permanent." She tilted her head, amused and tender at once. "Is that proposal?" "It's a practice," he said quietly. "I am practicing how to get it right." Amethyst stepped closer till her forehead rested against his. "Then keep practicing," she whispered. "Keys before vows, meals before rings, showing up before promises." He nodded. "I am heading there," he said. "I know," she replied. They stayed like that, quiet, steady, until the sun slipped lower. Sometimes, love is not fireworks. Sometimes, it is just the sound of forgiveness breathing again. That night, they drove to Delphina's home. She had cooked far more food than 3 people could eat. When Orion teased her, she laughed and said, "I am just making up for all the dinners you missed." After the dishes were done, she handed him a small envelope. "Your father wrote this before you left for college," she said softly. "I found it tucked inside an old book." Inside was a single page in Marcus's handwriting, slanted, but strong. Son, there will come a day when success tempts you to forget the smell of sawdust. When that happens, open a window, breathe, and remember, you come from hands that built things meant to last. First, Orion folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket beside the bracelet. He really was smarter than I gave him credit for, he murmured. Delphina smiled. He just spoke a language you had not learned yet. Later, after Delphina went to bed, Orion and Amethyst sat together on the porch steps. The air was warm. Thick whooped the sound of crickets. She is going to be okay, Amethyst said. She will, he agreed. We all will. He looked down at the bracelet. His father's mark, now his own. He thought about all the versions of himself he would have to outgrow. When Amethyst leaned her head on his shoulder, he did not speak. He did not need to. The silence between them no longer carried guilt. It carried gratitude. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed, its whistle fading into the night, like a promise already half kept. The whistle faded, but its echo stayed, like the memory of every love that never gave up. If this story moved you, type the word mother in the comments and tell me where you are watching from and what time of day it reached you. I read every comment. And I appreciate every one of you who listens with your heart. Sometimes the hardest journeys are the ones that take us home. Orion spent years chasing the kind of success that shines from a distance but feels cold up close. It took a mother's heartbreak, a friend's honesty, and the echo of a father's silence to remind him that worth is not built from titles or paychecks. It is built from the people who stay when the lights flicker. We spend so much time trying to be seen by the world. We forget the faces that saw us first. But forgiveness, real forgiveness, does not wait for perfection. It waits for courage. And when we finally learn to show up, not as who we think we should be, but as who we are, that is when the story changes. Because sometimes redemption does not arrive with applause. Sometimes it just sits quietly across the table, smiling, and says, "You made it back." Did you enjoy the story? Kindly subscribe to the channel so that I can share more stories with you. I have so much more on the channel. On the screen, you will see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. See you in the next life story.